What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. We're going to preview the Washington schedule for 2024 and give you a very early projected record for this team. I think it's pretty clear that Washington's going to fall off from where they were last year. They're going to drop some. How far will they fall? Well, we'll see, but the schedule, it's going to be tough now that they're in the Big Ten. This is the schedule from last year, and remember they played Michigan State, a Big Ten team actually in the non-conference, and played Boise State and Tulsa, so not too tough of a non-conference schedule. But it's going to be totally different because they're in the Big Ten this year. And so here is that schedule. And before we go game by game, let's kind of break it down. So they've got Weber State, Eastern Michigan, and Washington State. That's their non-conference schedule. They'll play Washington State in Seattle, neutral site game. That one should be a lot of fun. I don't think Washington State's going to drop off as much maybe as Oregon State when you look at the coaching change and everything there. So that one could be somewhat competitive, especially considering how much Washington could potentially drop off. So yeah, that could be a fun matchup there. And I guess it's still going to be called the Apple Cup. But the home schedule, again, those couple of non-conference games, then Northwestern, Michigan, USC, and UCLA. They're going to play all the teams, all the new teams in the Big Ten. So all the former Pac-12 teams. They'll play Oregon on the road, but they get UCLA and USC at home, and then they get Michigan and Northwestern at home. And then the road schedule is Rutgers on the road, Iowa on the road, Indiana, Penn State, and Oregon. So there's that other former Pac-12 team in Oregon. That's actually a pretty tough road schedule. Iowa is a very tough place to play. Penn State's a very tough place to play. And, of course, Oregon, Rutgers and Indiana maybe not as tough, but that's a pretty tough road schedule there for Washington. And then, again, the neutral site game against Washington State. So let's go game by game. They will start off with Weber State on August the 31st, and then Eastern Michigan on September the 7th. So they start off with two pretty easy games, and then they've got Washington State. So all three of their non-conference games will be in the first 3 weeks. They play Northwestern at home on the 21st. So their first true road game will be on September 28th on the road at Rutgers. And then in a rematch from last year's national championship, October the 5th, they play Michigan at home. Should be an interesting game. Both teams with new head coaches, a lot of roster turnover. Michigan didn't have all the transfers, but they had a lot of guys graduate, go off to the NFL. So that should be a fun one there. And then they'll get Iowa on the road there October the 12th. So their first bye week actually comes after this Iowa game. That is a very late bye week for your first bye week. And they play Indiana after the bye week on the road, then back home for USC on November the 2nd. And then it's on the road for Penn State on the 9th, back home for UCLA. Then they get their other bye week. So their bye weeks are very late. Their other bye week comes before the final weekend, before they play Oregon on the road on November 30th. So that's definitely something that jumped out on the schedule, is where their bye weeks are and how late they are in the season. The one between Iowa and Indiana, you'd like to have that one at least maybe a week earlier before you go on the road to play Iowa. That would be nice. And I think Oregon actually has a bye week before they play Washington as well. So both teams will be coming off a bye week there late in the season. So again, the schedule is pretty tough. They don't play Ohio State. That's the good news. That's about the only good news, because they do play Oregon. They do play Penn State. They do play Michigan. They do play Iowa. No Wisconsin. I mean, you can look forward to some positives here, but that's a pretty tough slate of games in the Big Ten. And again, they'll play 5 road games in the Big Ten, only 4 home games. All right, so let's get to the projections. They were 12-0 last year in the regular season. They were projected to go 10-2 with our projections. My prediction also was 10-2. Athlon had them at 10-2. The over/under was at 9.5. So it seemed like that was a pretty easy over. But things could have gone much differently for this team. They had a lot of close games. They weren't that far away, believe it or not, from going 9-3. So let's get to the projections this year. And keep in mind, this is not a prediction. It's just a projection with the formula that we use. It's based off of how tough the schedule is and how good we expect each team to be. I use a tier system. I have Washington in tier 3. They might not even be that good. Honestly, it's hard to say right now. But I didn't want to drop them off too much just because of where they were just last year. And they do have some guys coming back. So I've got them as a tier 3 team. And there are 5 tiers in the Power 5, if you're wondering, or the Power 4, I guess I should say. And this is the scale that we use. So if it's under 20, over 80, games that are pretty much guaranteed wins or losses, 20 to 29, 71 to 80. Games where I think the spread will be double digits, 10 to 14 points maybe in that range, 30 to 39, 61 to 70. Games where I think spread will be closer to touchdowns, 6, 7, 8, 9 points. And then the 50-50 games in the white, we'll be leaving those in the white. Those are games that can really go either way. So the easy wins, the first two non-conference games, I think really no problem in either one of those games. Washington should roll. Even with a team that could be a lot worse than they were last year, they're still going to be good enough to take care of business in those two games. And then no games in the blue, actually. We go all the way to the purple now for Washington State, Northwestern, Indiana, and UCLA. I do think Washington will be favored by about a touchdown in these games, but Washington State's a rivalry game. Northwestern's coming off a really good year. How good will they be? Of course, a lot of question marks with all the teams at this point. Indiana would be in the blue, but because it's on the road, that's why that one is in the purple. And then UCLA in the purple. They also have a lot of questions with the new coaching staff. So we'll see how that game turns out. But 4 games where I think Washington will be favored, not by a lot, but I think they will be favored by, about a touchdown. And then Michigan. So Michigan is going to be in the yellow here. This is a game that I think Washington's going to be an underdog by about a touchdown. And really, it's because Michigan, they've got the coaching change. They've lost some really good players to the NFL, so I don't expect Michigan to be quite as good as they were last year. I think they have a chance to maybe be a Tier 2 team instead of a Tier 1 team this year. But again, Washington, for me, is a Tier 3. Games at home, so they'll have a chance, but I think they will be an underdog by 6 or 7 points in this game. And then I think they'll be bigger underdogs against Penn State and Oregon. I think these two teams are both looking really, really good right now. Could be top 5-6 teams, especially Oregon. And you've got both of these games on the road. So that's why they are in the orange instead of the yellow, because they're on the road. Going to be very tough to win really either one of these games. And that's a tough way to close out your season with Penn State and Oregon on the road in 2 of the final 3 games. So really tough end of the season there. And then that leaves you with Rutgers, Iowa, and USC. And to me, these are your 50-50 games. These are the games that could really go either way. I've got Washington a tier above Rutgers, but because that game is on the road, that's why I think that one is a 50-50 game. So I think Washington probably will be favored by about a field goal in that one, but not by a whole lot. And so that's why it's a 50-50 game. Iowa is also a 50-50 game here. I think Iowa probably is going to be favored in this game by about a field goal, but both of those should be really close spreads and really games that, again, can go either way. And then you've got USC. I'm not sure about USC right now. I think that's one that could really go either way. I just don't know who's going to be the better team. USC is probably going to have the better overall roster, but the game is at Washington, so I don't know who will be favored in that one. I think it's a true toss-up, and again, a game that could go either way there in USC. So you've got 3 games that could go either way. You've got 3 games where they're going to be an underdog, and you've got 4 games where I think they'll be favored, but not by a ton, and then 2 pretty easy wins. And so you average all these out, you do the math with the formula that we have, and you get a projection of 7-5. So 7-5 is the projected record for Washington. And so let's say that if they were to lose to Michigan, Penn State, and Oregon, and let's say they beat Washington State, Northwestern, Indiana, and UCLA, that would mean that they would drop 2 of those 50-50 games. So Rutgers, Iowa, USC, they lose a couple of those, and they're at 7-5. You win a couple of those, you're at 8-4. But they could also lose to, say, Washington State or Indiana on the road. You never know. But again, with the formula that we use, their projection does come out to 7-5. I think that's pretty fair. I think 7-5, 8-4 is a pretty fair projection for this Washington team. A lot of question marks. Hard to say how good they'll be right now. We'll see as we get through the spring and have a little bit more time to evaluate the rosters for all these teams. But again, Washington right now, a very early projection, 7-5. Do you guys agree or disagree? Better or worse? Let me know your thoughts on this team down in the comments below.